Welcome to the first video in a series of short videos that I'm doing that I'm titling a Dispy primer on Christian nationalism. Now, I'm titling it that, number one, because I myself am a dispensationalist. But number two, one of the things I've noticed that as somebody who's been preaching and writing on this topic since early 2020, one of the things I've noticed is that within my circles, some of the most uninformed and even unhinged takes on this topic have come from within the dispensationalist camp. Now, there's probably multiple reasons for that. I think one of the reasons is because of our non-confessional training and non-confessional philosophy of ministry within our ecclesiology. And that's just a speculation, but one of the things I've noticed is most of the confessions, the historic Protestant confessions, directly address the role of the civil magistrate. And so any study of the confessions is going to include a comparison and contrasting with other confessions, like the contrast with the Westminster and the London Baptist, but it will also include somewhat of a diachronic study of those confessions, how the Westminster is modified for the American version, something you see with the three forms of unity as you get into the American churches. And so I think dispensationalists have largely missed out on a lot of those discussions. And so this just isn't a topic that we've had to think about. So I'm doing a series. I've got about 15 or 20 topics that I want to cover, a Christian or a dispensational primer on Christian nationalism. Now, this first topic is going to be covering what I call PreMil complementarianism and Christian nationalism. I'll explain that in just a minute, but for now, what we're talking about in all of these discussions on Christian nationalism, what we're ultimately talking about is the exercise of divinely delegated authority and power within a sphere. So when we think about that topic, we go all the way back to the garden, right? God created the heavens and the earth, but to Adam, he delegated power and authority in a particular sphere, just the earth, not the heavens. And so Adam was given both the authority to exercise dominion on the earth, and he was given the power or the ability to exercise that dominion. However, it was limited even within its sphere. He wasn't allowed to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So here's where we delineate between power and authority. Adam had the power to eat from the tree, but he did not have the authority. And so what we're always trying to answer is, what does it look like to faithfully exercise power and authority within a particular sphere? And that's really where I want to start then with Christian nationalism and premillennial complementarianism. I think this serves as a great illustration as to why Christian nationalism ultimately isn't a post-Mill issue. Now, that should be self-evident, I think, for multiple reasons, maybe the first of which being that one of the most famous books at this point on Christian nationalism is Stephen Wolfe's The Case for Christian Nationalism, and Wolfe is in Amill. So when you have guys saying things that essentially are saying, Christian nationalism is a post-Mill project, that's either a really uninformed take or a disingenuous take. And I don't know which it is. I don't want to impugn motives to people. But so let's talk then for just a moment about Christian nationalism and pre-Mill complementarianism. And so if I were to ask my brothers who are particularly pre-Mill how their complementarianism differs from that of our Amill brethren or our post-Mill brethren, I think if they were to be honest, they would say, well, my complementarianism really isn't different as a pre-Mill than that of my Amill or post-Mill brothers. And we would say, why? Why isn't it different? Well, because complementarianism is basically a system that seeks to address the exercise of delegated authority within a particular sphere, right? What does it look like today for us to exercise and respond to divinely delegated and limited authority within a particular sphere, right? It's ultimately a teleological argument. And so within complementarianism, we're asking the question about the sphere of the home in particular, and also the sphere of the church. Now, I don't want to get into the debate between complementarianism and patriarchy, things of that nature. That's another topic for another time. But what we understand is that complementarianism is a system that stands over against egalitarianism, right? Which is the exercise of delegated authority within a particular sphere, primarily the home and the church. And so when we talk about Christian nationalism is really the same thing in that it is seeking to put together a system of that answers what does it look like to faithfully exercise delegated authority within a particular sphere. And just like we do with complementarianism, where we go back pre-fall, we look at the fact that Adam was created first, that Eve wasn't even made when God gave the prohibition from eating from the tree. Eve wasn't even made yet, and therefore we see that Adam was to give to Eve God's revealed will. Paul makes that argument. Paul appeals to pre-fall anthropology and teleology in his arguments, and Jesus does the same thing. Jesus goes back in his address on divorce and marriage, that God in the beginning made them male and female. So one of the things that we do here is we go back to pre-fall. And so, as we talk about Christian nationalism, we're seeking to answer the question of what does it look like to exercise divinely delegated authority within a particular sphere. And I think within this sphere, obviously, we're talking about the civil realm. And that's going to get into another topic that I'll cover in the next video. And that topic in particular will be a good one. It's one we've not thought deeply enough about at times. And I think dispensationalists are really guilty here of not differentiating between God's revealed will, or sometimes what we might call his prescriptive will, versus God's decretive will, that which he has decreed to come to pass, right? So we know that God's revealed will for Adam and Eve was not to eat from the tree. However, his decretive will was that they would. And so sometimes God's prescriptive will or his revealed will is actually the opposite of his decretive will. And that is a big important factor that we'll cover in the next video. So for now, I just want to challenge you to think about this topic of Christian nationalism really as trying to put together a system that addresses divinely delegated authority within a particular sphere, just like complementarianism and egalitarianism. Now, we can disagree about how divinely delegated authority should be exercised within a particular sphere by the civil magistrate. But in the same way that complementarianism doesn't differ amongst pre-mills and post-mills and all-mills, I think it's fair to say that Christian nationalism really isn't tied to a particular eschatological system. And I'm quite comfortable making that argument because, as I've said before, I really am a rabid dispensationalist, and yet I'm also a pretty staunch Christian nationalist. So, and yes, I'm obviously a Baptist as well. So hopefully that's helpful just as an introduction to the topic, and I'll address God's revealed will in contrast to his decretive will in the next video.